Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global. We'll get you the top stories from India and the region. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh, and for news from rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague Oli Bharat in London. Good to have you with us, Oli.
Good to be with you, Shubhendu. It's 12:30 p.m. here in London, 1:30 p.m. across Central Europe. Coming up in the next half hour, India's Prime Minister speaks with Vladimir Putin, a diplomatic row over an arrest in France, and Oasis reunited. First, the headlines.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds telephonic conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin, reiterates dialogue and diplomacy is the way forward to resolve Russia-Ukraine conflict. Chief of United Nations atomic watchdog Rafael Grossi visits Russia's Kursk nuclear power plant to assess the situation. Russia says Ukraine has attacked the site. Prime Minister Keir Starmer hints at painful higher taxes on the wealthy as part of his plan to overhaul Britain, says things will get worse before they get better. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi held a telephonic conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday. He exchanged perspectives on Russia-Ukraine conflict and discussed his recent visit to Ukraine. In a post on social media site X, Prime Minister Modi said that both leaders discussed measures to further strengthen the special and privileged strategic partnership. He also expressed India's commitment towards peaceful resolution of the conflict. Recalling his visit to Russia last month, Prime Minister Modi reviewed progress on a number of bilateral issues and also exchanged views on a range of regional and global issues of mutual interest. The chief of United Nations atomic watchdog Rafael Grossi arrived at Russia's Kursk nuclear power plant on Tuesday amid allegations from Moscow of repeated Ukrainian attacks on the facility. Situated just 40 kilometers, about 25 miles from the volatile front lines, where Ukrainian forces have made incursions into Russian territory. The plant's safety is a pressing concern. Grossi's visit aims to assess the risks and ensure the plant's security, as the ongoing conflict has consistently threatened nuclear facilities, putting them in danger. Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov accused Ukraine of blackmailing the West by requesting permission to launch deep strikes into Russian territory using Western-supplied weapons. Lavrov also warned that Russia's nuclear doctrine is being revised, cautioning Western nuclear powers against any dangerous provocations. And we stay with the developments in the Russia-Ukraine war. My colleague Oli Bharat is in London, gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Oli, Russia's intense attack on Ukraine continues.
It does, Shubhendu. Russian forces have reportedly taken control of the village of Orlivka in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region on Tuesday. Meanwhile, Russia's foreign intelligence chief, Sergei Naryshkin, is trying to cast doubt on whether Ukraine acted alone in the recent incursion into Russia's western Kursk region, suggesting external involvement. Moscow has accused the US of assisting Ukraine in its surprise invasion of Russian territory on August 6th, but hasn't provided any proof to support that claim. Meanwhile, at least 4 people have been killed after Russia launched a barrage of missile and drone attacks across several regions of Ukraine, a day after Moscow's biggest air attack on its neighbour. Kiev's air defences were activated multiple times, successfully intercepting around 15 drones and several missiles. Meanwhile, intense clashes are reportedly underway in Russia's Belgorod region, amid claims Ukrainian forces launched a bid to breach the border there. This follows Monday's attack, where over 200 Russian missiles and drones were launched at Ukraine, killing as many as 7 people and damaging Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Well, DD India's Dasha Chernyshova joins me now live from Moscow. Dasha, what's the latest from the Belgorod region?
Well, first of all, it is Russia's neighboring region with Ukraine, and therefore it is under the repeated shelling and drone attacks from the Ukrainian side. Local authorities once again have said that there were drone attacks against the civilian targets inside the Belgorod region. They have taken the decision to close several more settlements in the Belgorod region for the residents, for security concerns, and to allow the military to do their job. We're also hearing from the governor of the region, Vyacheslav Gladkov, that the situation in the border areas of the regions is difficult but under control. He quoted the Russian Ministry of Defense saying that indeed there was an attempt by the Ukrainian armed troops to cross into the Russian Federation, but they are carrying out what he described as the planned work. In the meantime, we understand that Moscow is sending a very strong signal to the Western countries with regards to the Ukrainian activity on Russia's border in Belgorod or in Kursk region, saying that the Western countries must have been involved into the Ukrainian incursion of Russia's Kursk region. The Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov has most recently said that the U.S. involvement into the Kursk incursion is a given fact, and therefore he said the Western countries have chosen the path of escalation, and that is obviously fraught with significant consequences. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has also said that Russia is revisiting and clarifying its nuclear doctrine. So a lot of response here in Russia with regards to the Ukrainian actions on Russia's border regions. In the meantime, the lives of the people who have lived in those territories in Russia's Belgorod, in Russia's Kursk, and in Russia's Bryansk regions have changed dramatically, with them finding a home elsewhere in the country or being stationed in the shelters.
Okay, Dasha, thank you. A diplomatic row has been sparked by the arrest of Telegram CEO Pavel Durov in France over alleged crimes on the platform, including child abuse and drug trafficking. Russia says the severe accusations against Durov will be seen as an attempt to limit freedom of expression unless they're supported by substantial evidence. Durov is a Russian-born billionaire and was detained in France over the weekend as part of a probe into alleged crimes including child abuse images, drug trafficking and fraudulent activity on the instant messaging platform, according to French prosecutors. Staying in France, and the Socialists and the Greens say they will not participate in further talks with President Emmanuel Macron to find a way out of political deadlock. They're now calling on their supporters to hold peaceful protests instead. Emmanuel Macron slammed the door on a potential leftist government on Monday, saying it would be immediately removed from power by a majority of lawmakers from other camps. But facing a hung parliament in which each of the three almost equal groupings, the left, Macron's centrist bloc and the far-right National Rally, have ruled out forming a coalition, and so the president appears to be back to square one. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is warning that fixing Britain's problems and undoing harm caused by the previous government will take a long time. In a major Downing Street speech, he claimed some issues will get worse before they get better, and he pointed to difficult decisions in October's upcoming budget.
It'll be painful. We have no other choice, given the situation that we're in. Those with the broadest shoulders should bear the heavier burden, and that's why we're cracking down on non-doms. Those who made the mess should have to do their bit to clean it up. There is a budget coming in October, and it's going to be painful.
After 15 years,
we have
with a series of live shows in 2025. The band announced that tickets will go on sale on Saturday. Oasis's debut album, Definitely Maybe, was released 30 years ago. The band split in 2009 after a series of infamous backstage bust-ups. The first show will be held in Cardiff in Wales on July the 4th of 2025. And with that, I will slide away and hand you back to Shibendu.
Thank you, Ollie, for joining us with those updates. And Meta founder and CEO Mark Zuckerberg has made a stinging revelation about US President Joe Biden that might heavily impact the ongoing presidential campaign in the United States. Zuckerberg made these revelations in a letter written to a committee of United States lawmakers. In his letter, he says that in 2021, Biden government officials pressured him to censor some COVID-19 content and even jokes and satires related to it. In another revelation, Zuckerberg accused the officials of a premier US investigating agency of warning him to suppress contents related to corruption charges related to the then Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden's family. Mark Zuckerberg says that the FBI had warned him that the information was a part of Russian disinformation campaign, which turned out to be otherwise. Lastly, in his letter, Mark Zuckerberg says this year he will not make any contribution for creating electoral infrastructure for facilitating a US election. Still to come on DD India Global. IMF declares India as the world's fastest growing economy. Japan has termed the violation of its airspace by Chinese military aircraft as utterly unacceptable. You're watching DD India Global. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. India has been declared the world's fastest growing major economy by the International Monetary Fund's latest World Economic Outlook report as of July 2024. The country has outperformed major economies such as China, the United States and Russia. IMF forecast India's economic growth to reach an impressive 7% in 2024 and 6.5% in 2025. Currently, India ranks as the fifth largest economy globally in terms of the GDP, but is poised to ascend to the third spot in the near future, solidifying its position as a dominant player in the global economic landscape. India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, welcomed Brazilian Foreign Minister Mauro Vieira for the 9th India-Brazil Joint Commission meeting in New Delhi on Tuesday. At the opening remarks of the meet, Jaishankar said, India looks forward to discussing key G20 outcomes from India's presidency last year. Vieira's visit is an opportunity to explore new avenues of cooperation in bilateral, regional and multilateral arena across diverse sectors. The Ministry of External Affairs said that the meet will provide further impetus to strategic partnership between India and Brazil. Brazilian Foreign Minister is on an official 4-day visit to India.
So begin by congratulating Brazil for conducting the G20 meeting successfully and also on the first ministerial consensus document realized during the G20 Development Working Group ministerial meeting. I'd like to reiterate India's full support to the Brazilian G20 presidency and also recall that we got your fullest support during our own presidency. We also have a very important energy cooperation between our two countries. And we, of course, have particularly valued the biofuels cooperation that India and Brazil have established.
A high-level delegation from Ministry of External Affairs is in Maldives to review the progress of development cooperation projects in the archipelago. The delegation, led by Special Secretary and Financial Advisor Anurag Agarwal, held productive engagements with Maldivian ministers and senior officials of the government. The delegation also undertook site visits and reviewed the progress of Indian projects. The delegation is in Maldives till tomorrow. Japan has termed the violation of its airspace by a Chinese military aircraft as utterly unacceptable. The reaction comes a day after Japan scrambled jets and summoned a Chinese embassy official in Tokyo in protest. Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary Hayashi Yoshimasa said the airspace breach was not only a serious violation of Japan's sovereignty, but also threatened the country's security. The government continues to monitor increasing Chinese military activity near Japan and will be fully prepared for any airspace violation.
This is the first time we have confirmed and publicly announced a breach of our airspace by a Chinese military aircraft since we began taking measures against acts violating our airspace. Such airspace breach by Chinese military aircraft is not only a serious violation of Japan's sovereignty, but it also threatens our security, which is utterly unacceptable.
Meanwhile, China has said that it was verifying Japan's claims of incursion by Chinese military aircraft into its airspace. Philippines has strongly condemned China's actions in the South China Sea, describing them as aggressive, unprofessional and illegal, following a series of clashes and incidents in air, at sea over the past week. According to the Philippines National Maritime Council, Chinese aircraft engaged in reckless maneuvers near a civilian plane patrolling the Scarborough Shoal and Subi Reef. Chinese vessels reportedly harassed a Philippine government ship on a resupply mission to support local fishermen at Sabina Shoal, using tactics such as blocking, ramming and deploying water cannons on Sunday. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan held talks with China's top diplomat Wang Yi in Beijing on Tuesday. Both leaders discussed areas of agreement and disagreements that need to be managed effectively and substantively. This is the first trip to China by a U.S. National Security Advisor since 2016. The leaders have met 4 times, with their last meeting in January, shortly after a high-stakes summit between President Xi Jinping and Joe Biden that sought to reset frosty ties. Laura Westbrook reports from Hong Kong.
U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said he was looking forward to having productive talks with China's top diplomat Wang Yi. He said they would be discussing areas where they agree on, as well as areas where they have differences. Wang Yi said that he was looking forward to constructive and substantive talks. Now, they will be discussing areas of cooperation, such as limiting the spread of fentanyl, as well as areas where they have disputes, such as the South China Sea and the future of Taiwan. Now, one of the other things that is expected to happen is whether Jake Sullivan will be able to lay the groundwork for a final meeting between U.S. President Joe Biden and China's leader Xi Jinping. All this comes just a few months before the U.S. election, where voters are expected to vote for the next president. And if it is a Donald Trump presidency, well, that could see a shift in policy when it comes to China. In Hong Kong, Laura Westbrook reporting for DD India.
In Pakistan, the death toll in multiple cases of terror attacks reported in the Balochistan province has crossed 70. As per the latest reports, at least 73 people were killed when terrorists attacked police stations, railway lines and highways. Pakistan's military says 14 soldiers and police and 21 terrorists were killed in retaliatory operations. Rail traffic with Quetta was suspended on Monday following blast on a rail bridge in the town of Bolan, linking the provincial capital to the rest of Pakistan, as well as on a rail link to neighbouring Iran. The changing weather conditions are leading to rising of sea levels at an accelerating rate, especially in the far more vulnerable Pacific Island nations. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres issued yet another climate SOS to the world. This time he said those initials stand for Save Our Seas.
Must look to the Pacific and listen to science. This is a crazy situation. Rising seas are a crisis entirely of humanity's making, a crisis that will soon swell to an almost unimaginable scale with no lifeboat to take us back to safety. But if we save the Pacific, we also save ourselves. The world must act and enter the SOS before it's too late.
The UN chief was addressing the Pacific Islands Forum being held in Tonga. United Nations and the World Met Organization on Monday issued reports of worsening sea level rise, turbocharged by warming Earth and melting ice sheets and glaciers. The World Health Organization has launched a global plan to stop new outbreaks and spreading of the Mpox disease through collective national, regional and global efforts. The suggested plan will cover 6 months starting September 2024 to February 2025. DD India's Daniel Kijo has more.
WHO has announced a plan awaiting feedback from member states that requires $135 million in funding. The plan aims to enhance surveillance, boost prevention efforts, and improve the overall readiness and response to outbreaks. Key aspects of the plan include increasing research, ensuring fair access to medical countermeasures such as vaccines and diagnostic tests, as well as reducing the risk of diseases jumping from animals to humans. It will also increase community engagement in preventing and managing outbreaks. A pivotal element of the strategy is targeted vaccinations campaigns focused on those most vulnerable, such as healthcare workers and individuals in close contact with recent patients. Importantly, the plan stresses global leadership, providing countries most in need with access to essential medicine interventions and guiding timely and research responses to healthcare crises. A recent statistic from the Africa CDC indicates a concerning outbreak, with over 21,466 suspected cases of Mpox and 591 fatalities reported across the 13 African Union member states from the start of 2024 up to August 2023. The African Union has raised alarm over the virus reaching countries previously untouched by Mpox, with new imported cases signaling a significant risk of further spread beyond the African continent. Daniel Kijo in Dar es Salaam reporting for DD India.
Let's now turn to other stories making news around the world. Australian government plans to cap foreign student numbers from next year, curbing a multi-billion-dollar industry as it faces political heat on immigration. Education Minister says international enrolments to be limited to 270,000 in 2025 in a bid to create a better and a fairer system. US-based aerospace startup Boom Supersonic is developing a supersonic airliner called Overture. It has completed 2 successful test flights of its prototype in California's Mojave Desert. The company targets its first supersonic flight by year's end, paving the way for faster-than-sound commercial air travel by the end of the decade. SpaceX has postponed the liftoff of its polarized Dawn mission, which will include the first spacewalk by a civilian crew. A helium leak forced the delay of the capsule launch carrying 4 civilian astronauts that was scheduled for launch on 27th August. Rare collections of Hollywood legends, rock idols and movie posters has hit up auction block. Highlights of the auction are handwritten letter of Beach Boys fame Brian Wilson, last promotional shoot for R&B and superstar Alia and Abigail Folger and many more. The online auction opens on August 31st and will be live streamed.
Looking into even made so much charity work. Your coffee fortune, yeah. Well, Super Bowl 1993 Super Bowl.
Before we wrap up, let's head to California's coast, where a pack of surf dogs are hanging 10. They're paddling out the catch with the final waves of the day, getting up for quite a test of their skills. The annual Surf Dog Surfathon in September, with their owners by their side. These talented pups are mastering the art of surfing and stealing hearts along the way.
Launch and God is catching some great waves. Remember, because there are only 2 where the sweet spot is that cause a float easily over the waves. We will take you to the lifeguard right there. Okay, which brings me.
They seem pretty enthusiastic about the whole exercise. That's all for this edition of DD India Global. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan this QR code on your screens to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Global. Namaskar.